Tonight, we turn to Jerusalem, where US Secretary of State Marco Rubio stood alongside Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in a moment of high symbolism and even higher stakes. The location was deliberate, Israel's self-declared eternal and undivided capital, and the messages delivered from that stage underscored the depth of the US-Israel alliance and the magnitude of the challenges that lie ahead. Netanyahu opened the joint appearance by stressing the significance of Rubio's visit, calling it a powerful affirmation of the unbreakable bond between the two nations. His words were not casual. They set the tone for an evening of clear, uncompromising declarations. Netanyahu said, "I've said repeatedly that Israel's decision to act against the Hamas terrorist leadership in Qatar was a wholly independent decision by Israel. It was a decision taken by me and our top security chiefs. It was conducted by us, and we assume full responsibility for it because we believe that terrorists should not be given a haven, and the people who planned the worst massacre of the Jewish people since the Holocaust cannot have immunity. So we did it on our own, period." He continued with forceful clarity, making sure his message was heard by friend and foe alike. Netanyahu said, "We sent a message to the terrorists. You can run, but you can't hide. Now we'll get you." For Netanyahu, this was more than a military statement. It was a promise of relentless pursuit. The Prime Minister then turned to what he called the unbreakable alliance with Washington, framing it as central to the defense not only of their countries but of their shared values. Netanyahu said, "America has no better ally than Israel. It's obvious that Israel has no better ally than America. You've been a remarkable partner. We will continue to act together with great force and great determination to protect our countries, and I may add, to protect our common civilization." That word, civilization, hung heavy in the air. For Netanyahu, the fight against Hamas and Iran is not merely about borders or politics, but about survival on a historic scale. When Rubio stepped up to the podium, his tone was equally sharp, though framed with a distinctly American perspective. The Secretary of State emphasized that Washington is firmly focused on what happens next. Rubio said, "We are focused on what happens now. What happens next? What role can Qatar play possibly in reaching an outcome here that leads not just to the end of this hostilities, not just to the release of all of the hostages, both living and deceased, not just the disarmament and elimination of Hamas, but also a better future for the people of Gaza, which isn't possible as long as Hamas exists, which isn't possible as long as 48 hostages are being held." And so we're going to continue to encourage Qatar to play a constructive role in that regard. Rubio reminded his audience that the US has strong ties with its Gulf allies and remains in constant dialogue with them, both before and after the October attacks. His words made clear that Washington sees Qatar not just as a bystander, but as a necessary player in unlocking the hostage standoff and shaping the region's future. The issue of hostages is where both leaders drew their red lines. Rubio made a point of echoing President Trump's position without hesitation. Rubio said, "As far as the president's been clear on the ongoing issues in Gaza, and that is that every single hostage, both living and deceased, needs to be home immediately. Hamas can no longer continue to exist as an armed element that threatens the peace and security not just of Israel but of the world, and that the people of Gaza deserve a better future, one that cannot begin until Hamas is eliminated and until all of the hostages, both living and deceased, are home." This was not just policy, it was a demand. Rubio then reminded those listening exactly who Israel and the US are up against. Rubio said, "We have to remember who we're dealing with here, and that is a group of people that have dedicated their lives to violence and barbarism. And when you're confronting that hard reality, as much as we may wish that there be a sort of a peaceful diplomatic way to end it, and we'll continue to explore and be dedicated to it, we also have to be prepared for the possibility that that's not going to happen." His warning was clear. Diplomacy may remain the goal, but preparing for a far harsher reality is unavoidable. Attention soon shifted to the role of America's closest allies, particularly the United Kingdom and others who recently supported advancing Palestinian statehood at the United Nations. Rubio dismissed such moves as political posturing. Rubio said, "These things that people are doing in these different countries are doing at the United Nations. First of all, they're largely being done because of their own domestic politics. Second of all, they're largely symbolic. They have really no impact whatsoever in bringing us any closer to a Palestinian state. The only impact they actually have is it makes Hamas feel more emboldened. It makes other elements like Hamas feel more emboldened. It actually has made it harder. It's actually served as an impediment to peace. The implication was blunt. Symbolic votes may make headlines, but they complicate the path toward real peace and embolden the very groups responsible for terror. The discussion inevitably turned to Iran, a looming concern for both nations. Rubio framed Tehran's ambitions as not just an Israeli threat, but one with global consequences. Rubio said, "We cooperated and were involved together just a few weeks ago on the issue of Iran and Iran's desire to possess not just nuclear weapons, but short and mid-range missiles with the capability of threatening our presence here in this hemisphere, in this region, and of course the safety and security of the Jewish state. But I would venture to say a threat that actually extends well beyond that to the kingdoms of the Gulf and eventually even into Europe. In fact, some of the missiles they're trying to develop now can already range countries in Europe." His remarks underscored the growing sense of urgency that Iran's ambitions are no longer hypothetical but dangerously close to reality. He then issued his starkest warning of the night. Rubio said, "And so, a nuclear Iran governed by a radical Shia cleric that possesses not just nuclear weapons potentially, but the missiles that could deliver those weapons far away is an unacceptable risk, not just for Israel, not just for the United States, but for the world. And that is why the president continues with our campaign of maximum pressure. There will continue to be maximum economic pressure on Iran until they change." Taken together, the remarks by both leaders painted a picture of determination, unity, but also sobering realism. Netanyahu framed Israel's actions as necessary for survival, independent yet reinforced by its closest ally. Rubio, representing Washington, balanced solidarity with a pragmatic outline of what comes next: hostage recovery, elimination of Hamas, and curbing Iran's ambitions. For both men, the stakes extend far beyond Israel's borders. Netanyahu cast it as a civilizational struggle. Rubio described it as a battle against terrorism, tyranny, and nuclear proliferation that threatens not only the Middle East, but Europe, the Gulf, and potentially the world. As the cameras clicked and the statements echoed through Jerusalem, there was no mistaking the tone. This was not routine diplomacy. It was an urgent reaffirmation that both Washington and Tel Aviv are locked together in purpose. The path forward remains fraught. Qatar's mediation role is uncertain. Hostage negotiations are fragile. International votes risk emboldening extremists rather than fostering peace. And Iran continues to push toward capabilities that could destabilize entire continents. Yet for now, in the heart of Jerusalem, the message was one of resolve. Israel will act decisively to defend its people. The United States will stand firmly by its side. And together they will confront Hamas, restrain Iran, and push for a future where Gaza can emerge from the shadow of violence into something different. Netanyahu said, "America has no better ally than Israel. It's obvious that Israel has no better ally than America." That sentiment, repeated yet again, captured the essence of the night: a partnership forged in crisis, tested in war, and presented to the world as unbreakable. And as the sun set over Jerusalem, the world was reminded this is not just about borders, not just about politics. It is, as Netanyahu framed it, about defending a civilization.